never imagined a single invitation could crack open so many quiet truths. But the day I invited my family to my award ceremony, everything I'd swallowed for years began to surface. I stared at my phone as the responses trickled in. Dad typed first, "Just a lowly teacher." Then my sister, "We're busy going to dinner." And Mom just liked the message. A tiny blue thumbs up that somehow hit harder than any words could. I smiled at the screen and whispered to no one, "That's fine." But it wasn't fine. Not really. Because I had spent 10 years teaching in a public school that everyone else forgot existed. I graded papers at midnight, bought notebooks with my own money, stayed late for kids who had nowhere else to go. I told myself respect didn't have to come from blood. Meaning didn't need applause. Yet, reading those texts, something old twisted in my chest. The same twist I'd felt at family gatherings when Dad introduced me as the teacher while praising my sister's promotions and my cousin's startups. The same knot from every holiday when my work became a punchline about long vacations and easy days. I closed the app, zipped up my coat, and drove to the auditorium alone. The lights were warm. The stage smelled of fresh paint and nerves, and I felt a quiet determination settle over me. My principal shook my hand, beaming. "We're so proud. The district is covering this nationally. Your classroom innovation went viral. I don't even think you knew it yet." I nodded politely, smiling, but the thought lingered. None of this would matter to my family. To them, I would always be small, safe to dismiss. On the drive home, I replayed those messages again and again. "Just a lowly teacher. We're busy going to dinner." Mom liked the message. I practiced my smile in the rearview mirror. The same one I'd worn at 13 when Dad told me teaching was a waste of potential, at 19 when he suggested I switch majors, at 25 when my sister joked I'd never afford a real house. And now, at 31, I realized I had spent my life measuring my worth with their ruler. That night, I cooked pasta for one, ironed my blazer, and laid out a speech I might give if they asked me to speak. Not because I wanted applause, but because my students deserved to hear their stories told. I set my alarm, imagining my family at dinner, glasses clinking, scrolling on their phones, unaware that the same screen they used to dismiss me would soon show something else entirely. I slept lightly, dreaming of chalk dust and camera lights. Dawn came with a message from a colleague. "You ready to make history?" And for the first time in years, I smiled, not because anyone else was watching, but because I was ready. The ceremony itself moved like a blur. Names called, applause rolling in waves, my heart beating loud enough to drown out every doubt. When they announced my work, my innovation, my impact, I stepped into the light, thinking about the kids who had taught me resilience, every lunch I skipped to tutor, every quiet thank you note tucked into a backpack. I spoke plainly, honestly, because teaching had taught me to tell the truth. And when it ended, I didn't check my phone. I let the moment exist on its own, without anyone's permission. Later that night, back in my quiet apartment, the house dark and still, I finally glanced at my phone. No new messages from my family, just a notification from a friend. "Turn on the TV." I laughed softly, a little bitter, a little curious, and switched it on. The news anchor's voice filled the room, smooth and deliberate. A banner scrolled across the bottom. "Educators changing lives." My stomach tightened, and there I was. My face, my name, my work, right there on national television. Somewhere across town, I imagined Dad at his dining table, fork paused midair, scrolling, his own words echoing back. "Just a lowly teacher." My sister leaned over his shoulder. Mom, who had given that tiny thumbs up, stared at the screen in silence. The segment moved fast, clips of my classroom, kids laughing, building, learning. My voice narrated the story of our small victories, the pride in perseverance, the dignity in being seen. And I sat on my couch hugging a pillow, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. For the first time, my story wasn't being minimized. It wasn't being reduced to a punchline or a just a teacher joke. It existed.
Whole. Loud.
True. I watched the anchor call out my name slowly, emphasizing it like it deserved weight. I imagined my parents' table going quiet, forks hovering midair. A silence that said more than words ever could. And then my phone started buzzing. One call, then another, notifications stacking like bricks. Missed calls from Dad, Mom, my sister. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I remembered how easily they had dismissed me hours earlier. The cruelty in those few, casual words. I let the TV play. Let the anchor call me an inspiration. Let the clips of laughter, of learning, of hard work fill the room.
Finally, the segment ended.
I stood, turned off the TV, and felt lighter than I had in years. Not out of revenge, not even satisfaction, but because I didn't need their permission to exist in this moment. The next morning, my phone felt heavy in my hand. Messages piled up, each more urgent than the last. Dad, I saw you on TV. I didn't know. Mom, Ka, I've always supported you. I'm sorry if it ever seemed otherwise. Sister, look at this. Look at what you've done. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. I read them slowly, noticing what wasn't there. No, just a lowly teacher. No, we're busy going to dinner. And somehow, that absence felt more powerful than an apology ever could. I realized something then. This wasn't about making them understand. It wasn't about forcing them to recognize me. This was about the fact that my work mattered all along. Even when no one was watching, even when their attention was elsewhere, even when their approval felt essential. And for the first time, I understood something I'd been too young to grasp. My worth had never been theirs to give. I didn't rush to respond. I let the silence stretch, letting them sit with their own astonishment, the quiet weight of having underestimated me for decades. Then Dad called. I answered. Ka, his voice was careful, almost testing the name on his tongue. I saw you on TV. I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes, remembering all the years I'd waited for that sentence, all the times it hadn't come. When I spoke, it was calm, deliberate. I reminded him of the messages, just a lowly teacher, and my sister's reply. We're busy going to dinner. And Mom, the tiny thumbs up that stung. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Truth hanging in the space between us. Finally, he admitted it. I didn't think it mattered. And that was the truth.
I let him sit with that.
Long enough to understand, but not long enough to redefine my story. Because the truth had always mattered, long before cameras, long before national news, long before anyone else would see it. And for the first time, I felt a quiet pride, rooted in something deeper than approval. After that call, I let my phone lie face down on the kitchen counter. I didn't need to see the notifications stacking up, didn't need to hear apologies, congratulations, or awkward explanations. Not yet. I poured a cup of coffee, feeling the steam rise, watching it swirl like thoughts I'd shoved into corners for years. Every comment, every joke, every lowly teacher remark replayed in my mind. I realized how much I'd carried silently, how much of my own story I'd hidden just to keep the peace. And yet, in the quiet, I understood something remarkable. I didn't need them to see it anymore. The recognition that mattered had been mine all along. My students, the kids who had trusted me, the classrooms I'd built, they had always been my audience, my proof. Still, the messages kept coming. My sister sent screenshots of social media posts, friends congratulating me, strangers praising my work, even parents of students I'd never taught personally. How did I not see this before? She wrote. You're amazing, Ka. Mom's texts were quieter, but steadier. I didn't realize how hard you worked. I see you now. Dad's words were careful, measured, almost hesitant. Ka, I underestimated you. I see it now. I was wrong. Truly. I read them all slowly, noticing what wasn't there. None of them tried to rewrite the past. None of them begged forgiveness or waved off their mistakes. And in a strange way, that felt more honest than any apology could have been. I thought back to every moment I'd felt small in their eyes, every dinner, every holiday, every passing remark that left me doubting myself. And I realized that the moment wasn't about making them see. It was about letting myself be seen, fully, and without compromise. Later that week, I started getting interview requests, invitations to speak at conferences, opportunities I never imagined. And through it all, I moved cautiously, protecting the part of me that had grown strong without them. I refused to let their delayed recognition define my self-worth. One evening, my sister admitted something she'd never said aloud: jealousy. "It was easier to call you just a teacher than to admit you chose meaning over money," she confessed. And in that moment, I understood. Their words weren't only about me. They were about their own insecurities, their own measures of success. Mom apologized quietly, almost in passing. I didn't realize how it looked. "I see you now." I accepted it for what it was: acknowledgement without conditions, clarity without rewriting history. I had learned to protect myself from disappointment, to value my work on my own terms, and that lesson was more valuable than any delayed praise. That night, I sat on my couch long after the house went quiet. I thought about the kids, the classrooms, the lessons, the laughter. I thought about every challenge I'd faced and every small victory that had gone unnoticed. And I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years: peace. Because for the first time, I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I didn't need applause, acknowledgement, or approval. I had already earned it, quietly, persistently, in ways that no one could take away. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized the truth that had taken decades to fully grasp. Even if the cameras never came, even if national news never aired, even if my family had continued to dismiss me, I would still have been enough. I would still have mattered. I would still have been proud. In the days that followed, I moved carefully through the world that had suddenly turned a little brighter. Invitations, interviews, speaking engagements, they all came, but I approached them differently. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I had built something that no one could dismiss, something that mattered beyond applause or approval. One evening, my sister came by. She didn't knock. She just appeared in the doorway, holding a folder of printed articles about the award, screenshots of social media posts. Her eyes were wide, earnest, vulnerable. I was wrong," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It was easier to belittle you than to admit you chose something meaningful. And seeing this, I get it now." I nodded slowly. I didn't need to lecture her. I didn't need to make her apology grand. I just let her words hang in the room. Simple acknowledgement was enough. Mom called later that night, her voice quieter than usual. "Ka." I didn't realize how it looked from the outside. "I see all the work you've done. I see you." And Dad's voice was still careful, still testing the name like he was learning it all over again. "I saw you on TV. I'm proud. I always thought you'd do something big, but I didn't understand. I didn't see it clearly until now." I listened. I let the silence between words stretch, heavy but necessary. And then I spoke, calmly, firmly. "When I invited you to my award ceremony, Dad, you wrote, 'Just a lowly teacher.' My sister said, 'We're busy going to dinner.' Mom, you liked the message. That was real, raw, the truth of how I was seen. And I need you to understand that, because that truth shaped me, but it doesn't define me. My work mattered before cameras, before applause, before anyone else noticed. It mattered to me and the kids who needed it. And that's enough." There was a pause on the line. Long, thick, heavy with everything left unsaid over decades. I didn't think it mattered," Dad finally admitted. And that was the truth. I let him sit with it. Not angrily, not coldly, but with the clarity that comes from finally naming what was real. Weeks passed. Family dinners were rearranged to fit my schedule. Invitations poured in. Recognition came, yes, but differently now. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about holding steady in what I had built, protecting the part of me that had grown strong without their approval. And one evening, my sister admitted something surprising: jealousy. She admitted that belittling me had been easier than acknowledging my choices. She hadn't been cruel. She had been afraid, intimidated by a life built on purpose rather than prestige. Mom's apologies were quiet, almost incidental, but sincere. And I accepted them for what they were: honest acknowledgement, not a rewrite of history. Sitting on the couch that night, I thought about the kids, the classrooms, every late night and early morning, every small victory, every note tucked secretly into a backpack. I thought about the work I had poured into others' lives without expectation, and I felt it, peace. Because the truth was simple. Even if cameras never came, even if recognition never arrived, even if my family had never understood, I would have been enough. I would have mattered. I would have been proud. And that night, for the first time in decades, I slept without rehearsing the smiles, without measuring myself against anyone else's expectations, without the weight of dismissal pressing in. I had learned something my students had taught me all along. Integrity doesn't require applause. Resilience doesn't need validation. And meaning is yours to define. Weeks turned into months, and life shifted in ways I hadn't expected. Invitations, interviews, speaking engagements, they kept coming, but I approached each one differently. I no longer needed anyone to validate my work. I knew its worth. I felt it in the laughter of students, in the small victories that couldn't be measured by headlines. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old messages from my family, texts I had saved, the ones that had cut the deepest. And I realized something. Their dismissals, the jokes, the casual likes, they had shaped me, yes, but they hadn't broken me. I had carried my story on my own. I had honored it quietly, persistently. And that made every insult, every sideways comment, irrelevant. I thought about Dad again. I remembered his voice, careful, tentative, saying he was proud. I remembered my own words, firm and clear, reminding him of what he'd typed. Just a lowly teacher. I had named it, faced it, and I had survived it. Not because he had changed, but because I finally owned my own truth. Mom's quiet acknowledgement, my sister's awkward confessions, they were milestones, but the real victory had been internal, the understanding that my worth was never theirs to give. And the truth was even more powerful than I'd imagined. Their delayed recognition, their awkward pride, it wasn't the finish line. It never had been. The finish line had always been here, in this quiet certainty that my work, my purpose, my choice mattered. That I could wake up each day, do meaningful work, and sleep at night without needing anyone else's permission to exist fully. I thought about the kids again, the ones who laughed, who struggled, who trusted me with their small triumphs and failures. Every late night grading papers, every weekend workshop, every note tucked into a backpack, they were the proof. Their lives, their growth, their confidence were the applause I had earned long before cameras, long before TV, long before anyone outside my classroom noticed. Sometimes people ask me what felt better. The award, the recognition, seeing my dad freeze at his phone, or the interviews and speaking engagements. And honestly, none of that compares. The best part wasn't applause or headlines. It was knowing that even if the cameras never came, even if my family had never understood, I would have been enough. Still proud.
Still teaching.
Still rooted. If there's one thing I want anyone watching this to take away, it's this. Your worth isn't defined by the people who overlook you. It isn't measured by applause, praise, or permission. It's measured by your integrity, your persistence, the lives you touch, and the quiet victories that no one else sees. So, if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, laughed at for choosing a path that doesn't impress the loudest people in the room, this is for you. Your story matters. Your work matters. Your life matters. And sometimes, the most powerful recognition is the one you give yourself. And if this story resonated, if it reminded you of your own strength, or if it made you feel less alone, then don't stop here. There are countless voices out there, quiet but unshakable, waiting to be heard. Listen to them. Share them. Honor them. And remember, you are enough. Always. Because in the end, it's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about knowing, deep in your own heart, that you've done right by yourself and the people who truly matter. And that is a victory no one can ever take away.